So
Yeah.
I think both are really important. If you think about it, both my rabbinical work and my tourism work are two sides of the same coin. I can't think of anything more important from a religious perspective than helping to save a life. And each person is special in the eyes of God. So that means that when we work in security, we understand the value of each human being, and we make each human being something very special. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Catholic or Protestant or Muslim or Hindu, whatever you are, you're still a creature of God. And the importance
Yes.
of security is to show how much we respect the individual, that no human being has a right to hurt any other human being. I always tell my police friends, and I'm the chaplain of my police department here, that I could abolish the police. And they ask me, how would you do that? And I'd say, I teach everybody to live by the 10 Commandments. And if everyone would live by the 10 Commandments, we wouldn't have to worry about police. There'd be no robbing, there'd be no stealing, there'd be no murder. But unfortunately, it does exist. And part of human nature is that there's a good side to us and a bad side. So when we look at those two sides, we're able to understand the importance of the value of each life. And everything that I write, the undercurrent is always that to celebrate life and to realize that each of us is a special and unique creation in God's eyes. I don't think any book totally differs one from the other, because I think each human being has an underlying current that appears in all of his or her books. In my case, the number one thing is the celebration of life. And during the pandemic, so many of us felt that we had withdrawn from life. So personal resilience is a way to get back into life, to not allow COVID to defeat us, but rather that we have to find ways to grow even under the most difficult of circumstances. And hopefully that's a theme of my personal life. And I would like to share that idea with people around the world, that it doesn't matter how difficult the world makes our lives, we still need to find a way to see the beauty in life and understand that each day of life is a gift of God. So resilience is getting back into living life, not allowing COVID to defeat us, but rather we defeat it. Teaches about the fact that the human being is more powerful than anything that gets thrown at us. We can find ways to celebrate life even in the most difficult of times. And for many people, these have been very hard years. At first, I was going to say it was 1 year, but it's really been 2, maybe even 3 years. But despite that, we've used that time, many of us, to become closer to our families. We use that time to explore our own spirituality. We've learned that time to see, is this the direction I want to go in the world? Or what do I want to do with my life? And so, in a sense, and certainly COVID is a terrible disease, and so many people suffered, and I understand that. But even in suffering, we can find beauty. And if we can use and transform the negative into the positive, then that's really what personal resilience is all about. So for each of us, we had to find our own way. I used the time to write books, including this book about which we're speaking. I used the time to get to know myself better, to feel closer to my family, to feel closer to my friends, and to appreciate life, and to understand that life can just disappear instantaneously, but we have to find a way to see each day of life as a gift from God. Take a step back. The personal reconstruction it was inspired by a friend of mine who is a police officer in College Station, Texas. And he worked on what he would call auto reconstruction. In other words, when there was an accident, he would try to reconstruct the accident, see what was good and what was bad, and what mistakes were made, and how they could learn from this accident to prevent other accidents. And I'm the police chaplain of my police department in College Station. And I said to myself one day, not only do cars have accidents, but so do people. And we need to understand what makes us crash, what makes us fail. What is it that so many people, and I work at a federal prison, what makes people end up in prison? And I thought about it and I said, there really are 4 key elements. The first key element is that we lack a sense of spirituality. And then we end up with economic problems. And we end up with psychological problems. And we end up with legal problems. We think we're above the law. So I decided to ask 3 friends, one's my son, who is a lawyer, and his name is Nathaniel, and he wrote the section on law. And then a friend, Dr. Thomas Mars, who is a psychologist, and then a friend who lived in Portugal, whose name is Eduardo Leite. And I said, each one of you are specialists in your own area, but all 4 areas, if we don't look at them, can lead to crises. Why do people have crises? They have a crisis because they have an economic crisis and they don't know how to handle it. They have a psychological crisis. They have a legal crisis. But the underlying factor of the book is we always end up with a spiritual. To have the strength of spirituality, then we're able to face the other problems. And so just like we reconstruct an accident, I said, let's think about what points lead to a personal accident and how do we recover from that accident. And so it was really inspired by the College Station police. It in 2 ways, and all 4 sections help us. If we have to know who we are, what we want out of life, people who are unsatisfied, for example, I'm jealous of you because you have more than me or less than me, or I want this or that or the other thing, end up committing crimes because they think, no, this world has not been fair to me and I should get more money than I have. No, that's not necessarily true. So we need to think through what makes us happy and unhappy. That's also the psychological part. How do we balance our money correctly? How do we use it wisely? How do we not misspend it? Well, that's an economic part, but that's also a spiritual part. And how do we stay within the law? None of us are beyond the law. All of us need to live within the law, and the law helps us respect each other. And we spoke before about the first book about resilience. What is the law? The law is nothing more than a guideline. It's a playbook that allows human beings to work together, live together, and create together. And in a sense, that's a spiritual question also. Everything we do is the understanding that none of us is better or worse than any other human being. All of us have the same rights to be on this earth, and all of us need to respect each other economically, psychologically, and legally. The most surprising thing is I got to know myself better. For example, right now I'm writing a new book on tourism policing, and that is against police officers. But as I'm exploring those issues and looking back at the United States over the last 30 or 40 years in the history of tourism policing and police and the world of tourism, what I'm discovering is that so much of me is in those books without realizing it. And I don't mean that I'm writing about myself. I mean that assumptions that I made are really not sometimes correct and sometimes not correct. But I have to look at who I am to understand who you are. So whenever I write a book, in a sense, it's a dialogue between the subject matter and myself. And how do I put? I don't think you can take the author out of a book. I think in all cases, all authors reflect their inner soul. They may claim to be objective, but none of us are totally objective. All of us bring something of ourselves to whatever subject matter we write on. And so, if you're smart, when you write on these subjects, you use the book, one, as a way of getting a point across, of teaching, but also as you're teaching others, you're teaching yourself. Feel that you have lived a good life and that you've made yourself happy and those around you happy. So it's not how much money you have. It's not how many books you've published or how many cars you have or how many houses you have. Success is when you feel at peace with yourself. I'd like to know what they think of the books and what they would like the next book to be, because I think the resilience books should become a series. And so the first one was personal resilience, but I think we need to talk about resilience in the face of an economic crisis, resilience in the face of a psychological crisis, resilience in the face of a spiritual crisis, resilience in the face of a legal crisis. Every one of us can live a better life. Every one of us can work hard to turn the negative into the positive. And so I would love to know what types of books I could write that would be helpful to others. They also help myself.